us to celebrate the 100th anniversary of Richard Wilbur with a presentation of his poetry by John Towey. John Towey has made his living as an actor for 50 years on Broadway, off-Broadway, regional theaters, film, and TV. He acted for 3 seasons each at the Arena Stage in Washington, D.C., the Guthrie Theater in Minneapolis, and Joe Papp's Public Theater in New York City. Since moving to L.A. in 1990, he has acted in over 30 television shows, including Murphy Brown and The X-Files, as well as a few films, including The Invisible Kid and Fearless. John has acted in plays at the Mark Taper Forum, the Amundsen Theater, and the Pasadena Playhouse. He acted in 3 Shakespeare productions at the Amundsen, directed by Sir Peter Hall, and was asked by Hall to appear in his Broadway revival of Amadeus, which he accepted, and which ran for 5 months at the Music Box Theater. John is going to present the poetry of Richard Wilbur, 1921 to 2017, who was twice winner of the Pulitzer Prize for Poetry. Here's a magnificent actor, John Towey.
Well, I don't know how I can follow that. That's a pretty outstanding introduction. Thank you so much, Harry. Thank you. He's already told you that this man here has won 2 Pulitzer Prizes. The first one he won for his translation of The Misanthrope, which is a play by Molière, and it's in French, it's in rhyming couplets, the entire play, as all of Molière's plays were. And so to translate that, just to give you an idea, to translate it into English, the French 2 words in the couplets, literally translated, don't rhyme. So he had to find a way to do this without changing the meaning, which he did magnificently. It's the Tartuffe that he did and the Misanthrope are the always the ones that are used. Those translations are used. He's won tons of awards, too many to list here, but and he taught at Wesleyan, and he lived in Cummington, Massachusetts, and Key West. So I'm just going to do some poetry that I've memorized. I haven't done these publicly for a long time, but we had a 20-year correspondence, Richard Wilbur and I. He gave me permission to do whatever poetry of his that I wanted to do, and without any permissions fees, because the publishers of this book said I would need to pay $30 for each poem, and I had 20 that I'd chosen. But he said the people from Harcourt Brace Jovanovic said we own the rights to almost all the ones you've chosen, but there are 3 or 4 that Richard Wilbur has the right to. So we're going to forward your letter to him. And that's when he gave me permission to do it without charging any permissions fees. So I was thrilled. And we carried on a correspondence for literally 20 years. And I love his poetry. I was in 3 productions of The Misanthrope, his translations, and in one of his translations of Tartuffe. And those were in the 60s. And it wasn't until 1986 until the Statue of Liberty was going to be, they were going to have a centennial and a big do about the awakening of the statue. It was covered in scaffolding for 2 years, and then it was taken down, and in 86, he was asked to do a poem for the rededication of the statue. And in 1986, there was a picture of the statue, all done, no scaffolding. And I bought a picture of, I bought a magazine, the Life magazine, that had a picture of it completed. And I bought it, and I turned the page, the front page, and on the inside cover were 16 lines of this very long poem that he wrote for the dedication. And that's the first time I was aware of him as a poet, as opposed to just a translator. Is there somebody behind me here? I guess there is. It's just a picture of somebody, a couple of very attractive girls. These are the 16 lines that propelled me to buy this book, which has 250 poems in it. But these are the 16 lines. Mourn for the dead who died for this country, whose minds went dark at the edge of a field, in the muck of a trench, on the beachhead sand, a blast amid ships, a burst in the air. What did they think of before they forgot us? In that blink of time, before they forgot us. The glare and whiskey of Saturday evening, the drone or lilt of their families' voices, the bend of a trout stream, a fresh-made bed, the sound of a lathe or the scent of sawdust, the mouth of a woman, a prayer, who knows? Let us not force them to speak in chorus, these men diverse in their names and faces, who lived in a land where a life could be chosen. Say that they mattered, alive and after, that they gave us time to become what we could. Those are the 16 lines that made me fall in love with his poetry. So out of these 250 poems in this book, I chose 20. And I'm going to do as many as we can until the hour is almost up.
Well, I read Richard Wilbur as a young college student, and for me, I loved his vowels, his roundness in his poetry. I mean, there are a lot of what you call today neo-formalists, and he's certainly one of them, but he's the best of all of those. So I just like his craftsmanship, and I saw Tartuffe at Amphitheater downtown Washington Square, before before that group moved into Lincoln Center, and Barry Primus was a lead, and Kazan directed that. But I just love the precision, and then as we heard in those lines right there, his strength of narrative. And there's just something almost pure. I know that's a hard word to define, but there's just something pure about his poetry that I always loved.
All right, I'm going to start out with a poem that I kind of consider birth. It's not the birth of a person, it's the birth of a plant. And then I'm going to do several poems about his childhood, and then his adolescence, his war years, his wife, his children. So this is the first one. It's called Seed Leaves, and it's, I have to say that many of the poems I had to not choose because if there were more than 2 words that I had to explain, that I didn't know what they meant, I just didn't use those poems. So there's one word in this first poem that I have to tell you what it means. The word is Yggdrasil, spelled Igdrasil. It's a Norse god who's represented by a tree that extends throughout the universe, and the stars are the fruit. Now, he has so many rhyme schemes that he does. This particular one is just rhyming couplets and 2 or 3 beats to each line. So it goes like this. Here's something stubborn comes, dislodging the earth crumbs and making crusty rubble. It comes up bending double and looks like a green staple. It could be seedling maple or artichoke or bean. That remains to be seen. Forced to make a choice of ends, the stalk in time unbends, shakes off the seed case, heaves aloft, and spreads 2 leaves, which still display no sure and special signature. Toothless and fat, they keep the oval form of sleep. Now this plant would like to grow, and yet be embryo, increase, and yet escape the doom of taking shape. Be vaguely vast, and climb to the tip end of time like boundless Yggdrasil that has the stars for fruit. But something at the root, more urgent than that urge, bids 2 true leaves emerge. And now the plant, resigned to being self-defined, before it can commerce with the great universe, takes aim at all the sky and starts to ramify. It's called Seed Leaves. Next one is his childhood. This is called Boy at the Window. And it's iambic pentameter, but the rhyme scheme is A, B, B, A. First line rhymes with the fourth line, and the second and third line rhyme. It goes like this. It's called Boy at the Window. Seeing the snowman standing all alone in dusk and cold was more than he could bear. The small boy weeps to hear the wind prepare a night of gnashings and enormous moan. His tearful sight can hardly reach to where the pale-faced figure with bitumen eyes returns him such a God-forsaken stare as outcast Adam gave to paradise. The man of snow is none the less content, having no wish to go inside and die. Still he's moved to see the youngster cry. Though frozen water is his element, he melts enough to drop from one soft eye a trickle of the purest rain, a tear for the child at the bright pane, surrounded by such warmth, such light, such love, and so much fear. Boy at the Window. This is called Digging for China. Far enough down is China, somebody said. Yeah, dig deep enough and you might see the sky, as clear as at the bottom of a well. Except it would be real, a different sky. Then you could burrow down till you came to China. Oh, it's nothing like New Jersey. No, there's people, trees, and houses and all that, but it's much, much different. Nothing looks the same. Well, I got a trowel out of the shed and sweated like a coolie all that morning, digging a hole beside the lilac bush down on my hands and knees. It was sort of a praying, I suspect. I watched my hand dig deep and dark, and I tried and tried to dream a place where nothing was the same. The trowel never did break through to blue, but before the dream could weary of itself, my eyes were tired of looking into darkness, and my sun-baked head of hanging down the hole. I stood up in a place I'd forgotten, blinking and staggering while the earth went round and showed me silver barns, fields dozing in palls of brightness, patens growing and gone in the tides of leaves, and the whole sky china blue. Before I got my balance back again, all that I saw was China. China! China! It's called Digging for China. Richard Wilbur was born in New York City, but in his very young child, his family moved to a farm in New Jersey. And there was a black man that worked for them. And this is a poem that's called He Was. He was a brown old man with a green thumb. I can remember the squeak on stones of his hoe, the chug, choke, and high madrigal wheeze of the spray cart bumping below the sputtery leaves of the apple trees. But he was all but dumb and filled some quarter of the day with sound all of my childhood long. Of all the sounds, of all his labors, I can now recall never a single word until he went in the dead of fall to the drowsy underground, having planted a young orchard with so great care in that last year that none was lost, and May aroused them all. The leaves saying the land's praise to the livening clay, and the found voice of his buried hands rose in the sparrowy air. Now, a little adolescence. This one's called Playboy, and the rhyme scheme on this is A, B, B, A, if that makes any sense. First line, fourth line rhyme, second, third line rhyme. Okay, here we go. High on his stockroom ladder like a dunce, the stock boy sits and studies like a sage the subject matter of one glossy page. It's lost in curves as Archimedes once. Sometimes without a glance he feeds himself. His left hand, like a mother bird in flight, brings him a sandwich for a sidelong bite, and then returns it to a dusty shelf. What so engrosses him? The wild decor of this pink-papered alcove into which a naked girl has stumbled with its rich welter of pelts and pillows on the floor? Amidst which, kneeling in a supple pose, she lifts a goblet with her farther hand, as if about to toast a flower stand, above which hovers an exploding rose, fired from a long-necked crystal vase that rests upon a tasseled and vermilion cloth, one taste of which would shrivel up a moth. Or is he pondering her perfect breasts? Nothing escapes him of her body's form and grace, or of her floodlit skin, so sleek and warm, and yet so strangely like a uniform. But what now grips his fancy is her face, and how that cunning picture holds her still at just that smiling instant when her soul, grown sweetly faint and swept beyond control, consents to his inexorable will. It's called Playboy. This next poem is called Piccola Commedia. It means a little comedy. When he was in college in the late 30s, still the Depression, for 2 summers, he hitchhiked around the United States. In those days, you could stick out your thumb and somebody'd pick you up without any danger of getting hurt. But he did it for 2 summers. So this is a piece called Piccola Commedia. He's someone I don't really know. The sun-charred, gaunt young man at the highway's edge in Kansas 30-odd years ago. On a tourist cabin veranda, 2 middle-aged women sat, one in a white dress, fat, with a rattling glass in her hand, calls, "Son, don't you feel the heat? Get up here into the shade." Like a good boy, I obeyed, and was given a crate for a seat and an orange crush and gin. "This state," she said, "is hell." Her thin friend cackled, "Well, dear, you got to fight sin with sin." "Well, no harm in a drink, my stars," said the fat one, jerking her head. "And I'll take no lip from Ed, him and his damn cigars." Laughter. The combine whined on past, and dry grass bent in the backwash. Liquor went like an ice pick into my mind. Beneath her skirt I spied 2 sea cows on a floe. "Go in and talk to Mary Jo, son. She's reading a book inside." As I gangled in at the door, a pink girl curled in a chair looked up with an ingenue stare. Screenland lay on the floor. Amazed by her starlet's pout and by the way her eyebrows arched, I felt both drowned and parched. Desire leapt up like a trout. "Hello," she said, and her gum gave a calculating crack. At once, from the lightless back of the room came the grumble of someone heaving from bed. A Zippo's click and flare, then more and more apparent, the shuffling form of Ed, who never looked nor spoke, but moved in profile by, blinking one gelid eye in his elected smoke. This is something I've never told. And some of it I forget, but the heat, I can feel it yet. And that conniving cold. Piccola Commedia. This is called Looking into History. I have to tell you two words in this that you may or may not know. One is Matthew Brady, who was the great photographer who took wonderful pictures during the Civil War. And the other word is wilderness, which was one of the great battles in Virginia during the Civil War. So it goes like this. He has a postcard. He's looking at a postcard. 5 soldiers, fixed by Matthew Brady's eye, stand in a land subdued beyond belief. Belief might lend them life again. I try like orphaned Hamlet working up his grief to see my spellbound fathers in these men who, breathless in their amber atmosphere, show but the postures men affected then, and the hermit faces of a finished year. The guns and gear and all are strange, until beyond the tents I glimpse a file of trees verging a road that struggles up a hill. They're sycamores. The long abated breeze flares in those boughs, I know, and hauls the sound of guns and the great forest in distress. Fathers, I know my cause, and we are bound beyond that hill to fight at wilderness. It's called Looking into History. He joined the Army in 1942, and he was stationed in Italy and France and England, and he said, and this is a quote, he said, "It wasn't until I saw Anzio and the Maginot Line that I began to versify in earnest." He was a cryptographer. He was assigned to try to decipher in English the messages from the enemy. So he wrote several poems when he was in the war, but this is the one I've chosen. It's called First Snow in Alsace. You may remember it was originally called Alsace-Lorraine. It was a section of land between France and Germany. It was the German Empire started it, and now it's a part of France. But this is called First Snow in Alsace. The snow came down last night like moths burned on the moon. It fell till dawn, covered the town with simple cloths. Absolute snow lies rumpled on what shell bursts scattered and deranged, entangled railings and crevice lawn, as if it did not know they'd changed. Snow smoothly clasps the roofs of homes, fear gutted, trustless and estranged. The ration stacks are milky domes, and beyond the ammunition pile, the snow is climbed in sparkling combs. And you think, beyond the town, a mile or two, this snowfall fills the eyes of soldiers dead a little while. Persons in disguise, walking the new air, white and fine, trade glances, quick with shared surprise. Oh, children's windows, heaped benign, as always winter shines the most, and frost makes marvelous designs. The night guard, coming from his post, 10 first snows back in thought, walks slow and warms him with a boyish boast. He was the first to see the snow. It's called First Snow in Alsace. He was given a Guggenheim Fellowship, and he and his wife went to Rome. And while he was there, he wrote a poem called Piazza di Spagna. He wrote this for his wife. Piazza di Spagna, and that's colon, early morning. When my wife and I were there in 2015, I saw they're long marble stairs. And it's filled with people during the daytime, but at night, it's all washed down and it's empty, and the fountain at the bottom is not running at night. And this early morning means really before the sun comes up, or it's just breaking. I can't forget how she stood at the top of that long marble stair, amazed, then with a sleepy pirouette went dancing slowly down to the fountain quieted square. Nothing upon her face but some impersonal loneliness. Not then a girl, but as it were a reverie of the place, a called for falling glide and whirl, as when a leaf, petal, or thin chip is drawn to the falls of a pool and, circling a moment above it, rides on over the lip, perfectly beautiful, perfectly ignorant of it. While he was in Rome, he met a man who could read minds. So this is the longest poem I'm going to do for you today. It's called The Mind Reader. So if you can imagine, he was also a drinker, the mind reader was. First person, I'm the mind reader. This is again in iambic pentameter, 5 beats to a line, although they don't rhyme. And imagine Richard Wilbur sitting here, over there, at the same table. Some things are truly lost. Think of a sun hat, laid for a moment on a parapet, while 3 young women, one perhaps in mourning, talk in the crenellate shade. A slight wind plucks and budges it. It scuffs to the edge and cartwheels into a giant view of some description. Haggard escarpments, if you like, plunge down through mica shimmer through a moss of pines, amidst which here or there a half-seen river lobs up a blink of light. The sunhead falls with what free flirts and stoops you can imagine, down through that reeling vista or another, unseen by any, even by you or me. It is as when a pipe wrench, catapulted from the jounced back of a pickup truck, dives headlong into a bushy culvert. Or a book, whose reader is asleep, garbling the story, glides from beneath his steamer chair and yields its flurried pages to the printless sea. It is one thing to escape from consciousness, as such things do, another to be pent in the dream cache or stony oubliette of someone's head. They found when I was little that I could tell the place of missing objects. I stood by the bed of a girl or the frayed knee of an old man whose face was lost in shadow. When did you miss it? People would be saying, where did you see it last? And then those voices, querying or replying, came to sound like the cries of birds when the leaves race and whiten and a black overcast is shelving over. Not that the mind is a landscape, but if it were, there would in such case be a tilted moon wheeling beyond that wood through which you groped, its fine spokes breaking in the tangled thickets. There would be obfuscations, paths which lead to dried-up stream beds, hemlocks invited through shiny clearings to a groundless shade, and yet in a sure stupor you would come at once upon dilapidated cairns of braided moss and half-healed blazes leading to where, around the turning of a fear, the lost thing shone. Imagine a railway platform, long cars coming to a cloudy halt beside it, and the fogged windows offering a view neither to those within nor those without. Now, in the crowd, forgive my predilection, is a young woman standing amidst her luggage, expecting to be met by you, a stranger. See how she turns her head, the eyes engaging and disengaging, pausing and shying away. It is like that with things put out of mind, as the queer saying goes. A lost key hangs trammeled by threads in what you come to see as the webbed darkness of a sewing basket. It's flashing a little. Or a photograph misplaced in an old ledger turns its bled, oblivious profile to rebuff your vision, yet glistens with the fixative of thought. What can be wiped from memory? Not the least meanness, humiliation, terror which made you clench your eyes, or that pulse of happiness which quickened your despair. Nothing can be forgotten, as I am not permitted to forget. Well, it was not far from that to this corner cafe table where, with my lank gray hair and vatic gaze, I sit and drink at the receipt of custom. They come here day and night, sad women of the quarter dressed in black as to a black confession. Blinking clerks who have supposed that Taurus ruminates upon their destinies, and men of affairs down from Milan to clear it with the Magus before they buy or sell some stock or other. My fellow drunkards, fashionable folk, mocking and ravenously credulous, and skeptics bent on proving me a fraud for fear that some small wonder unexplained should leave a fissure in the world and all St. Michael's hosts come flapping back. I give them paper and pencil, turn away and light a cigarette, as you've seen me do. They write their questions, fold them up. I lay my hand on theirs and go into my frenzy. Raising my eyes to heaven, snorting smoke, lolling my head as in the fumes of Delphi, and then with shaken, spirit-guided fingers, set down the oracle. All that, of course, is trumpery, since 9 times out of 10, what words float up within another's thought surface as soon in mine, unfolding there like paper flowers in a water glass. In the 10th case, I sometimes cheat a little. Oh, that shocks you? But consider what I do cannot, so most conceive, be done at all. And when I fail, I am a charlatan, even to such as I have once astounded. You know, whereas a tailor can miscut my coat and be a tailor still. I tell you this because you know that I have the gift, the burden. Whether or not I put my mind to it, the world usurps me ceaselessly. My 6th and never-resting sense is a cheap room, black with the anger of insomnia, whose wallboards vibrate with the mutter's plaints and flushings of the race. What should I tell them? I have no answers. Set your fears at rest. I scribble when I must. Your paramour is unsuspecting. Your paramour is faithful, and your spouse is unsuspecting. You were not seen that day beneath the fig tree. Still, be more cautious. When the time is ripe, expect promotion. You are admired in secret. If, in your opinion, profit is in it, you should take the gamble. As for these fits of weeping, they will pass. It doesn't matter that my lies are bald and my evasions casual. It contents them not to have spoken, yet to have been heard. What more do they deserve? If I could give it, mute breathers as they are of selfish hopes and small anxieties. Faith, justice, valor, all those reputed rarities of soul confirmed in marble by our public statues, you may be sure that they are rare indeed, where the soul mopes in private. And I listen. Oh, Sometimes I wonder if the blame is mine, if through a sullen fault of the mind's ear, I miss a resonance in all their fretting. Is there some huge attention, do you think, which suffers us and is inviolate, to which all hearts are open, which remarks the sparrow's weighty fall and overhears in the worst rancor a deflected sweetness? I should be glad to know it. Oh, meanwhile, saved by the shrewd habit of concupiscence, which like a visor narrows my regard, and drinking studiously until my thought is a blind that's lowered almost to the sill. Oh, I hanker for that place beyond the sparrow, where the wrench beds in mud, that sunhet hangs in densest branches, and the book is drowned. Ah, now you've read my mind. Oh, one more, perhaps, just but a mezzo litro. Grazie, professore. It's called The Mind Reader. This is called Parable. I'm going to stand up now for this one. I read how Quixote, on his random ride, came to a crossing once, and lest he lose the purity of chance, would not decide whether to fare, but wished his horse to choose, for glory lay wherever he might turn. His head was light with pride, his horse's shoes were heavy, and he headed for the barn. It's called a parable. How are we doing on time? Oh, okay. Let's skip that one. This is called a Miltonic sonnet. As you know, a sonnet is 14 rhymes. This poem is called A Miltonic Sonnet for Mr. Johnson on his refusal of Peter Hurd's official portrait. You know, every president has their portrait painted. It was on the walls. And he commissioned this guy named Peter Hurd to do it. And as you know, John Milton was blind. So every time this poem appears, and he always puts the date that he published it right below it. It's usually in italics, very small. It's 6 January 1967. It's just about the time that, it was the time that Johnson started sending thousands more troops to Vietnam. There's only two things you have to know about this. The first word of this sonnet is called air, and it's not A-I-R, but it's H-E-I-R. And it's about, he never mentions his name, but it's about Thomas Jefferson. Let me just repeat the name of the poem again. When Milton wrote poems, sometimes they could be very short and long. He always had very long titles for a lot of them. So this is called A Miltonic Sonnet for Mr. Johnson on his refusal of Peter Hurd's official portrait. Heir to the office of a man not dead. I gotta say one more thing. There was a composer named Palestrina who composed around the time of Bach, but a little earlier. Heir to the office of a man not dead, who drew our declaration up, who planned range and rotunda in his drawing hand, and harbored Palestrina in his head, who would have wept to see small nations dread the imposition of our cattle brand, with public truth at home mistold or banned, and in whose term no army's blood was shed. Rightly you call that picture too large, which Peter Hurd by your appointment drew, and justly call that capital too bright, which signifies our people in your charge. Wait, sir, and see how time will render you, who talk of vision but are weak of sight. This always made me admire him even more because he published it right at that time. This is a little short poem called The Star System. You have to know one word in this, called Antares, which is a giant red star that can only be seen really clearly in the southern hemisphere. It's a red giant. It's 12 times larger than our sun. It's called the star system. While you're a white, hot youth, emit the rays which, though now unmarked, shall dazzle future days. Burn for the joy of it, and waste no juice on thoughts of prompt discovery. Produce. Then, white with years, live wisely and survive. Thus you may be on hand when you arrive. And like Antares, rosily dilate, and for a time be gaseous and great. Star system. A summer morning. How are we doing on time? Pretty good.
Got 5 minutes.
Okay. I have to choose the ones I want to do then. Okay. I'll do this one. It's called The Prisoner of Zenda. This is rhyming couplets and 2 or 3 beats to a line. At the end of The Prisoner of Zenda, the king being out of danger, Stuart Granger, as Rudolph Rassendyll, must swallow a bitter pill and renounce his co-star, Deborah Kerr. It would be poor behavior in him and in Princess Flavia were they to put their own concerns before those of the throne. Deborah Kerr must wed the king instead. Rassendyll turns to go. Must it be so? Why can't they have their cake and eat it, for heaven's sake? And yet, it's hard to quarrel with a plot so moral. One redeeming factor, however, is that the actor who plays the once dissolute king has learned through suffering not to drink or be mean to his future queen. Far from being a stranger, is also Stuart Granger. This is called a wedding toast. Oh, we're getting close. In 1972, one of his sons got married. And he a toast. I don't know if he did it at the reception, but I tried to find, I couldn't find out. But it's called a wedding toast. And this is crazy. The first, second, and fourth line rhyme, and they're in iambic pentameter. And the third line just has 3 beats. St. John tells how at Cana's wedding feast, the water pots poured wine in such amount that by his sober count, there were 100 gallons at the least. It made no earthly sense, unless to show that whatsoever love elects to bless brims with a sweet excess that can without depletion overflow, which is to say that what love sees is true. Love's fullness is not made, but found. Life hungers to abound and pour its plenty out for such as you. Now, if your 2 loves will lend an ear to mine, I toast you both, good son and dear new daughter. May you not lack for water, and may that water smack of Cana's wine. So, okay, I guess I'll do one more. It's almost 10 to crazy. I still have time, I think, to do this. This is called, he had one daughter. She was the first child. And during her early, when she was in 7th and 8th grade, she used to hurry home and go up to her room and write. She ultimately became a published writer, and her short stories would appear in famous magazines. Anyway, this is called The Writer. At her room, at the prow of the house, where light breaks and the windows are tossed with linden, my daughter's writing a story. I pause in the stairwell, hearing from her shut door a commotion of typewriter keys like a chain hauled over a gunwale. Young as she is, the stuff of her life is a great cargo. and some of it heavy. I wish her a lucky passage. But now it is she who pauses, as if to reject my thought in its easy figure. A stillness greatens, in which the whole house seems to be thinking. And then she's at it again, with a bunched clamor of strokes, and again is silent. I remember the days, Starling, trapped in that very room 2 years ago. How we stole in, lifted a sash, and retreated, not to affright it, and how for a helpless hour through the crack of the door, we watched the sleek, wild, dark, and iridescent creature batter against the brilliance, drop like a glove to the hard floor desktop, and wait then, humped and bloody, for the wits to try it again. And how our spirits rose when suddenly, sure, it lifted off from a chair back, beating a smooth course to the right window and clearing the sill of the world. It is always, my darling, a matter of life and death. As I had forgotten. I wish what I wished you before, but harder. Is that it? Do I have time to have one more if I run fast over to the...
I think you've got time for one more.
I think I do. Okay. We'll do this quickly. This is the last poem in these 250 poems. And he wrote it when he was in his 20s. And it's to his wife. It's called The Beautiful Changes. And so one more thing. The last word, the 250th poem is the word wonder. And Einstein said that God was in the word wonder. And there were a couple of French philosophers who said, wonder is God to them. This is called The Beautiful Changes. One wading a fall meadow finds on all sides the Queen Anne's lace lying like lilies on water. It glides so from the walker. It turns dry grass to a lake as the slightest shade of you valleys my mind in fabulous blue lucernes. The beautiful changes, as a forest is changed by a chameleon's tuning his skin to it. As a mantis arranged on a green leaf grows into it, makes the leaf leafier, and proves that any greenness is deeper than anyone knows. Your hands hold roses, always in a way that says they're not only yours. The beautiful changes in such kind ways, wishing ever to sunder things and things selves for a second finding, to lose for a moment all that it touches, back to wonder. The beautiful changes. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, John. I just wanted to say that what I noticed about this performance, actually, it's really an existence right here before us. I mean, you were living all of these, and there's such a sense of the understanding of the poetry, and there's such a freedom compared to when you're sitting in front of the computer. And I almost feel like this is a new beginning, for something in our time. And, I see that you really can see the pictures, and you have such a great sense of the dialect of all these different characters. And I can see also why you and also Richard Wilbur, both of you are so good in understanding drama and just, living this and bringing all this to life. And it was certainly transfixing for me.
Oh,
and there's also a playfulness in the rhyme.
Yeah.
And,
Thank you.
just,
We had a wonderful relationship. Just correspondence, but it went on forever. He used to send me postcards when one of his poems were going to appear in the New Yorker. And he'd say, next week there's going to be a poem that I think might suit your purposes as an actor. Our wives died in the same year, 2007, and he wrote me a beautiful letter there, but I better go because I got Dracula to do now.
John is, he is showcasing all of his acting skills today. He's going to transform. Go ahead and head over, John.
All right, I will, thank you.
He's going to go over to the library to get ready for the radio reading of Dracula. Huge props for John.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank
once
you.
again.
Make sure you've got your mask on, John.
Yeah, where did I put it?
I don't know.
Here it is.
Okay, so for those of you that are ready for Dracula, John has enough time to head over to the library. We might start a minute or two after 2 o'clock. But Harry, let's talk for just a moment about your poetry hour. And I believe there's a milestone next week. Is that correct?
You know, it depends on how you count it. I was looking as today as the 48th. But there's another one in there I may have not included. So next week is either the 49th or the 49th or 50th. I'm not exactly sure. You know, I did one with Brett early on acting. And if you want to include that, I know for sure it would be 50. But we can be imaginative. But I'm not, you know, I try to keep good records. But by my count, today was the 48th one.
So the 50th would be March 19th, which is 2 weeks from today, and 2 days after the 1-year anniversary of Creative Chaos.
1 year anniversary of what?
Of Creative Chaos, of the live show.
Yeah, I think that's the way it went down. I think you started it and then you saw me, you know, near the theater and you asked me. But I tell you, just for 1 minute to talk about this right here, you know, John just really, I don't know how this could be done any better. Just a magnificent, you know, existence. There was no artificiality. He helped me. You know, I've read Richard Wilbur's poetry, you know, since late '69, early '70, and he just brought it all to life. And this really was a transfixing hour for me. And I like to keep learning about poets and poetry. And John certainly educated me. And I really admire Richard Wilbur. So, you know, thank you, Jennifer, for allowing all the different varieties that we show on this show.
It is absolutely my pleasure. I'm so grateful for everything that you bring to it. And here's to 48, 49, 50 more of these episodes of Harry's Poetry Hour. Also, if you've missed any of those, we're putting them through post-production and putting them up on YouTube now. So you can find, I think there are 7 or 8 of them up on YouTube already.
And Jennifer, if I may, I just would like to take 1 minute to thank not only you, but all of the people who work with you, you know, editing, shooting, sound, et cetera, because I've looked at a couple of those shows and they just a magnificent production values along with the content. And I'm just thrilled to watch them. I mean, it's almost like falling in love with, you know, these productions. I think it's really on an extremely high level. Obviously, we all know how great MPTF is and all of the Channel 22 work that you and the others have done. But I would like to thank you and the Creative Chaos team, you know, for doing all that great work.
Absolutely my pleasure.